welcome to the November edition of the Nisei Veterans Memorial Center's An Afternoon with the Author. We are so thrilled to have all of you with us today as we hear from Mike Malaghan, the author of A Question of Loyalty. My name is Deidre Teagarden. I'm the executive director here at the Nisei Veterans Memorial Center, where our mission is to inspire people to find the hero within themselves through the legacy of our Nisei veterans. Once again, we want to thank all of you for being with us today, and very excited to have Mike Malaghan here with us. Before I introduce our speaker, I just wanted to go over a few quick housekeeping items. Number one, as usual, we will be taking questions at the end of Mike's presentation. So feel free to send in your questions on that little question and answer bubble at the bottom left of your screen. We will get to as many as we can after his presentation. Also, this is being recorded and will be available on our Nisei Veterans Memorial Center YouTube channel in about a week and a half to 2 weeks. So we encourage you to go to our YouTube channel and check out this and other talks that we have done this year. Also, we would not be able to do what we do if it weren't for the generous support of our corporate sponsors. They allow us to do these talks, all the work that we do in our archives, as well as the exhibits that we host throughout the year. So please help me mahalo HouseMart, Central Pacific Bank Foundation, VIP Food Service, Maui Health Systems, Pasha Hawaii, Maui Sons and Daughters of the Nisei Veterans, Service Rentals, Arizumi Brothers, Abbey Carpet of Maui, TJ's Warehouse, Mid-Pacific Pest Control, Maui Disposal, Purell Water Specialty Company, Sei Design, Mune Kiyoharaga, RT Tanaka Engineers, and the Maui News. We thank them all very much. Now, without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Mr. Mike Malaghan. A decade ago, Mike began his journey to write novels on the 100th Infantry Battalion, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, and the Military Intelligence Service. He still remembers that night at the Hawaii Theater. The lights flickered on the premiere showing of the documentary, The First Battle, revealing why most Japanese in Hawaii were not interned in World War II. A eureka moment. Only 2 weeks earlier, Mike had decided to write a historical novel. While he spent a lifetime in the corporate world on 4 continents, in his heart, he always thought of himself as a writer. Married to a Tochigi New Nisei, Issei, and living in Hawaii, he knew the story of the Nisei Territorial Guard, who were stripped of their uniforms weeks after Pearl Harbor, only to enlist a year later when allowed. And he knew that that was the stuff of a good story. But these American-Japanese warriors did not just drop out of the sky on December 7th, 1941. So instead of a single book, a trilogy developed. Picture Bride, his first book, celebrated the mothers and fathers who left an impoverished country to come to America. The sequel, the one we're talking about today, A Question of Loyalty, begins on the morning of December 7th, 1941, and takes you through the 100th Infantry Battalion fighting in Italy in 1943 to the eve of the Battle of Monte Cassino. Now Mike is working on Proof of Loyalty following the 100th, 442nd, and MIS 2 wars end. A lover and reader of history, Mike has been fortunate to visit 203 countries and territories, starting with the Peace Corps in Africa in 1966. Much of Mike's travel has centered on book research. He and Tomoko drove to Camp Shelby, Mississippi, where the 442nd trained for a year. In nearby Hattiesburg, they interviewed the Mississippi woman who married a Japanese American in 1942. They visited Manzanar and the Japanese American museums in Los Angeles and San Francisco to try to get a feeling for life in the internment camps. They have trekked the battlefields in Italy and France where the Nisei fought and died to take their place in the American pantheon of heroes. Please help me give a very warm virtual Maui welcome to Mr. Mike Malaghan. Mike, nice to have you with us today.
Well, thank you, and I can tell you it is a privilege Let me get my slideshow going, and please verify that you can see page one of my slideshow.
I can see page one. I
Terrific.
can also
And
see the side view as well.
okay, I'm not sure I wanted to do that, but maybe we got the wrong one. If everybody sees that, they should see the main one.
We do see the main one also.
Oh, okay. So you're probably seeing two. I have one that just shows the main slide, so I'm not sure why you're seeing two screens.
Well, sometimes two is better than one.
Okay, but anyway, let me get started because I know folks are ready to go start. I'd like to thank you and also Floyd Negotiate. He and I connected on the last year's trip to France, never thinking that would happen. And he was going to be a tour guide for me for Maui. My wife and I were looking forward to a weekend, but we all know the stories and we all have our own stories. Rather than just tell a story about the writing of this particular book, as I look back and the writing that I've done in the two books I finished and the one I'm working on now, I thought of 5 different what I call inflection points, or things. We now look back at the history of the 442nd, and you have a wonderful museum there. You're celebrating Chung Wai Ching this week, and the 442nd, as if all these things were inevitable. They just were going to happen. And I don't think they were so inevitable. So I thought today we would cover 5 different what if points. One is, how did a 17-year-old Japanese American au pair and a Chinese man, that's Hung Wai Ching, shape Hawaii's successful resistance to FDR's order, remove the Japanese from Oahu? Second what if is how the response and the humiliation of the second generation Nisei. They were kicked out of the Hawaiian Territorial Guard after guarding it for being, armed guards for 6 weeks. What would have happened if that had been the end of it? It wasn't, but we'll talk about that. And what about Camp Shelby? With finally the 442 and is going to be in there. You got the boys from the mainland, the guys from Hawaii, and they end up fighting all the time and almost ended. And of course it didn't, but there was a what if moment there. And how the 100th, I refused the 100. Clark took them, but there wasn't guaranteed they were ever going to see combat. What would have happened if they had just been guards instead of combat? The history would have been different and the legacy would have been different. And finally, what about our good friend, General Dilquist, everybody's favorite general, if you're a Nisei or a Sansei? His questionable order to save the lost battalion also made the 442nd more famous. So in a way, a perverse way, he helped the legend. So let's start with go back to 1937 to get kind of a background of the Japanese. We're in Hawaii, we're supposed to be in camps. It wasn't a December 7th, all of a sudden, what do we do with the Japanese? Colonel Patton, later General Patton, he writes a long 200-page report, which I've read most of. I'll just spare you one sentence, but you'll get the drift. In the event of a war with an orange country, and listeners, you only get one choice, one guess of who the orange country is, the Army should arrest and intern certain persons of the orange race, strip the orange community of its leadership, and proclaim martial law. But look at this, a year earlier, 1936, 5 years before Pearl Harbor, the President of the United States, he doesn't mince words. What arrangements and plans have been made relative to concentration camps? The internment camp marketing perspective came later. What plans have been made relative to concentration camps in the Hawaiian Island for dangerous or undesirable aliens or citizens in the event of national emergency? Fortunately, in Hawaii, it was quite different. In California, people were drooling over the possibility of getting rid of those people. In Hawaii, you had a different perspective. You had the chancellor of the university, Charles Hemingway, and he got together with Hung Wai Ching, which was featured this month, the Chinese man, head of the YMCA, community leader. Charles Loomis, who came from California, knew about the California disease, became a community leader in Hawaii, and then the leader of the statehood in the 1937-38 Senate hearings that didn't go anywhere, but Shigeo Yoshida, another community leader. These 4 people got together. They knew the plan, and they formed a committee to prepare the community for war, but also prepare them not to have this mass internment. But I think there was something else that had a lot to do with the fact that they were not the Japanese were not kicked off Oahu. Think back to 1939. The FBI is going to set up a new office, and you see the man on the right. That is Robert Shivers. He lands at that time, and he's met by Charles Hemingway, who says, by the way, it's kind of a tradition in Hawaii that expatriate families often take in an all par Japanese Nisei going to the university or to some of the colleges here. And we have this one young lady who needs a home. Her name is Sue Isanaga. Later on became Isanaga. And he said, well, I don't need a maid. I don't even have children. But he looks in Hemingway's eyes and realizes that just saying no right off the airplane may not be the good idea. Then he starts thinking, hey, my first interrogation. So the 17-year-old girl comes to his house the first or second night he's in Hawaii. And you see a picture of a young girl here. Well, I met her when she was in her 80s, full mental acuity. She's passed on since that time. And she was in my home. We had lunch with her daughter and my wife. And I'll just give you this interrogation that went on that first night when she enters the home. And she's sitting in the living room. Robert Shivers comes in and he takes a look at her and he says, well, who's your favorite movie star? Get the thing rolling. And Sachiko breathes easy. She says, oh, Clark Gable, but I like Earl Flynn too. Well, who's your favorite Japanese movie star? And she said, well, I don't speak Japanese so well. Well, you don't go to Japanese movies? Well, I went once with my mother. I fell asleep. So your mother goes to Japanese movies? Sometimes, but not so much anymore. Her favorite actor is William Powell. He's kind of boring to me. Well, and then Sue asked him, who's your favorite movie star? Instead of snapping back, I'm in charge of this meeting, he says, well, James Cagney and Bette Davis. And then Sachiko says, well, have you seen Dark Victory? It's playing downtown in Hawaii right now, and it has Humphrey Bogart. Mother likes Ronald Reagan, thinks he's handsome. But when he speaks, you can tell he's just memorizing his lines. He's not very believable. And then Shivers goes on to say, well, you go to a Japanese school? Because he heard about these Japanese schools. And Sachiko's lips turns down, telegraphing unhappy memories. Yes, my father runs one of those schools. We, that is, my brothers and I, hated it once we got to junior high school. Well, what did you learn at the Japanese school? Well, I can write my name in kanji. And father taught us Confucius's golden rule. Do not impose on others what you do not wish for yourself. Respect the elders. Take care of them. Honor our teachers. Bathe twice a week. And Shivers looks into Sachiko's eyes. Well, what do you think of the emperor, Hirohito? He likes horses. Huh? Well, I don't know much about him, but we have a picture and he's on a horse. Okay, well, Japan has modernized very quickly. You must be very proud to be Japanese. And Sachiko snapped her shoulders back. I'm not Japanese. And she presses her fingers over her upper chest. I'm an American. I'm proud to be an American, Mr. Shivers. The following morning, while Shivers drove to his office, he studied the many Asian faces that he passed on the street. He began to wonder how many Japanese Americans were like Sachiko. She was so at odds with his image. So Sachiko, except for her eyes, was very much like the girls he met in Memphis when he was in high school. And I have to think that girl, she was a girl then, had a lot to do with the fact that there was no mass internment in Hawaii. There were 2,000 that were arrested. But even after Pearl Harbor and the community was trying to keep the Japanese on Oahu, look what happens 2 months later. This is FDR's message to General Emmons. I have long felt that most of the Japanese should be removed from Oahu to one of the other islands. Knox, who's the Secretary of Navy, really anti-Japanese. Personally, I shall always feel dissatisfied with the situation until we get the Japanese out of Oahu. And yet, Emmons held. And here's another what-if moment. On the right-hand side, we see Mr. Happy Face, General DeWitt. He's very famous for saying, once a Jap, always a Jap. Not a very nice expression. And over in the left, you see General Emmons, who is open to the idea of, let's take a look at the facts. Suppose in the Army, for whatever reason, had put DeWitt in charge of Hawaii and Emmons in charge of California. They had exactly the same rank. Thank God that it didn't work out that way, because General Emmons did listen, and as we know, there was no mass internment. So that's One, what if? Secondly, we know about the ROTC was mostly Japanese Americans, Nisei, in the eve of World War II. The war breaks out, they're activated, they're all given rifles and told to guard the governor's mansion, the beaches, utility, telephone wires, and so forth. And they're out there 24 hours a day guarding with, guns. And on the January 19th, they're told to come to a school 6 weeks after Pearl Harbor, and they think, well, maybe we're going to get an award, maybe some of our parents should be released from Sand Island. Instead, they walk in a very tearful Fielder and tells Colonel Fielder, their commander, tears in his eyes and says, I hate to tell you this, but I have to discharge you. You've been classified as enemy aliens. Leave your guns here and walk out. Can you imagine the humiliation and the anger? Ted Tsukiyama, you see on the upper right, he became the historian, says it felt like somebody punched him in the gut. And they leave, I don't know, angry, humiliated. What would have happened to these young men if that was the end of it? What type of angry people will we have running around saying, we tried to serve and they took it away from us? And here's a magic moment. Hung Wai-ching meets these men as they leave. And he'd been warned a few hours ahead of this impending disaster for these young men. And he challenges them. He says, well, what are you going to do? And they said, what do you mean, what are we going to do? We just got kicked out. And he keeps saying, what are you going to do to prove that they made a mistake? And some of the men get together that afternoon and they set a petition. They said, yes, we're not going to let these guys prove that to make the character, so we'll do something. And so they write a petition. The end of the petition says, Hawaii is our home. This is to General Emmons. The United States, our country. We know but one loyalty, and that is to the United States Stars and Stripes. We wish to do our part as loyal Americans every way possible. We hereby offer ourselves to whatever service you may fit to use us. General Emmons talked to Hemingway, the chancellor, said, what kind of men do we have here? Now, Emmons is a smart politician. He waits, he's gotten orders from Washington that the civilian Nisei working at Fort Island and other military installations are going to have to leave. They can't have them there. But the day that he issues the order to dismiss them, he also issues the order to create the Varsity Victory Volunteers. And these young men they're sworn in, they're not soldiers, but they're given uniforms, they get salary, they live on the barracks at Schofield Barracks, and they become the very famous Varsity Victory Volunteers, as you see here. Some months later, in fact, almost a year later, Eleanor Roosevelt visits Hawaii. And guess who one of her guides is going to be? And that's good old Hung Wai-ching, who's also a very good politician. And he takes out Eleanor to see what these young men are doing. She is impressed, and she tells FDR, her husband, what's going on. And there's other pressures on Roosevelt, and he finally issues the order and says, oh, by the way, being an American is not anything to do with racial, no, not at all, and therefore you can volunteer. Well, as soon as the word got out, you could volunteer. The 100th, the boys in the Varsity Victory Brigade all were eager to sign up. And a good story, but again, a lot of what if. What if Hung Wai-ching had not met those men and challenged them? There would have been no Varsity Victory Volunteers, most likely. Well, now you've got the Katunks and Buddha heads. And the Katunk is a sound, according to the Hawaiians, when a mainlander, a man, his head hits the ground, Katunk. And the mainlanders equally have a nice pejorative. They call them Buddha heads, which is a word for pig, and also Buddha. So, and we're not talking about casual arguments. We're talking about fistfights. But let's take a look at the perspective of each of these men. On the left-hand side, you see the Japanese, as they get ready to ship out to California, they're honored at the governor's mansion, and you got the big picture of the statue of King Kamehameha behind them. They got the leis, the speeches, the relatives are stuffing money into their pockets, into their bags. They get on the ship, they're gambling, they're having a good time, you playing the ukulele, happy-go-lucky. Boy, they're eager. Now let's take a look in the upper right here. What do you see? We see barracks and camps, Manzanar, and all these other horrific places. And I'm sure some of you have been to some of the camps and you see the barracks. I visited the concentration camps in Poland. I tell you, the visuals are the same. I know the insides are a little bit different, but the visuals are the same. So these mainlander boys, they come broke. Some of them are angry. Their parents have lost their homes, their businesses. You see the young woman there, classic picture, as she waits for the train to come and pick up her child to go to these camps. And they talk different. The Hawaiian boys have this pidgin English, happy-go-lucky. The mainlander boys, more or less the King's English, more of them are Christian. The anger goes in. We're not, like I say, we're not talking about fist fights. We're talking about Donnybrooks. And of course, the commanders of the unit keeps giving them speeches. The enemy is the Nazis, not each other. And it gets so bad that Colonel Pence, the commander, tells Washington, we're not sure if this is going to work. We might have to disband the 442nd. Well, we know it didn't happen. So what happened? Well, one of the chaplains said, what would happen if we send some of these Hawaiian boys to visit the camps? Now, Camp Jerome and Camp Roar were a couple hours away. And some of the girls had come from the camps to visit the USO. But even that caused problems because they spoke the King's English. They went to school with a lot of the mainlander boys, so they congregated themselves, and the Hawaiian boys were often out looking in. So they visit the camp, and they're singing their ukulele songs because they're going to do a talk and everything, and then turns down the road, off the road to a sandy road. And all of a sudden, what do they see? They see in the upper left, armed by men dressed like them with machine guns aimed in the camp. Of course, it goes silent. And then they enter the camp. They see the open toilets, not even doors. They are segregated by men and women. They take a look at their barracks and they see how families are stuffed together. And the food is very limited. Well, they understand. And they spend a weekend there. And Danny Inouye, he was Danny Inouye in those days, Private Inouye. This is what he said in his book, Journey to Washington. I wonder what I would have done if it had been me and my parents inside that camp. Would I have volunteered for a country that betrayed me? Remember, we volunteered from a close-knit community that is generous and supportive of what we're doing. Our families haven't been forced out of their homes and herded into backward prisons, never knowing when it will end or what kind of life is possible when this camp nightmare ends. But those mainland boys volunteered while in those camps, willing to die for a country that locked up their parents and siblings. Well, from that moment on, the Donnybrooks and the fighting between the two groups ended. They realized that they had a common foe, and that was the Nazis and, of course, self-respect and dignity. Well, there's a fourth what if. We know the heroics of the 100th, the 442nd, and we take it as a given that they were going to fight. Not so. I mentioned earlier that Ike refused them. General Clark, who had lost some of his troops, to Eisenhower because he's starting to prepare for Operation Overlord the following year, he'll take everybody. But then they get to Africa, and the General Ryder tells the 100th, you're going to be guards because you can't trust these Arabs and they'll steal everything. So we need good guards. Well, Pence loses his temper a little bit. And he says, we have been in combat training for a year and a half. We are not guards. And it gets kind of testy. Finally, Ryder says, are you sure these men will fight? And Pence says, absolutely. Well, we know they did fight. And they landed in Salerno. They had 1,300 active, healthy men. By the time the casino action was done, they had been reduced to 521 effectives. The other 800, they're not all dead, but they got trench foot, they're wounded, they're in hospitals, they're not fit for battle. And during that couple months, advancing up the Buda of Italy, they earned the reputation of the Purple Heart Battalion. And I'd like to just talk about one or two of the people in those first months. The first person to die was Joe Takata. And it's kind of interesting. Joe was already somewhat of a famous person. He was a baseball player, and some people thought he was good enough maybe to play in the big leagues. Might be an embellishment, but for sure, he was a premier athlete, well known in Hawaii. And the same type of gung-ho A-type personality that makes for a good baseball hitter and a strong runner also makes for a good leader, but also dangerous to himself. So on the first day of battle, he's pinned down. Joe says, he takes his gun, I gotta charge up the hill. He gets up, takes 1 or 2 steps, and a piece of shrapnel hits him right in the head, and he falls down. He still is moving his arm like the Atlanta Braves. Carry on, carry on, carry on, and he passes away into history and to legend. In Casino, in late November, there were 3 Medal of Honor winners. They weren't honored at the time because generals were a little embarrassed that they had these heroic Japanese and their parents are in the camp, some of them. But you had Hayashi and Ohata that day. You've got the machine gun. You can see the machine guns. Now imagine you're on the bottom and these guys are shooting at you and each machine gun nest has 2 or 3 guns. What are you going to do? So these guys, Ohata and Hayashi, charged the hill. Amazingly, they were not even nicked. And the drama is tremendous. We don't have time for it. But they take out 50 German soldiers in those machine gun nests. And the guns are dropped. They pick up another one. The same day, a few hours later, Mikio Hashimoto has a similar thing, pinned down, charges a hill, and takes out a machine gun nest. And they live for the day. Hashimoto, unfortunately, he died the next day. Hayashi and Ohata lived out to see the war. But this is the type of courage and bravery that was recognized later on. So they almost didn't get a chance to fight, but we can see Mark Clark and General Ryder definitely made the right decision. And I'm going to end my prepared remarks to talk about the rescue of the Texas Lost Battalion. Of course, they weren't lost. Everybody knew where they were. Let's talk about General Dahlquist just for a minute. He was a paper pusher in the Army until the war broke out. And then paper pushers became combat journalists. Some of them made the conversion very well. You could make the case Dahlquist was somewhat out of his element. We will set the date. It's in October 1944, and the Americans are doing very well. There's a hill. And Dahlquist says there's an opening up the hill, charge up there, and we can take the crest of the hill. His senior advisors say, no, this is not a good idea, General. We got Germans on the left and the right. They charge up the hill. Those flanks could encircle them. Don't worry, I'm going to send other troops up there. You guys just follow my orders. So the Texas Battalion runs up the hill, takes the top of it, and sure enough, the Germans on the flank circle them, and now it's New York Times news. This was not an isolated event. For some reason, it hit the newspapers. Dahlquist sends 2 of his own Texas relief forces. They can't do anything. So what do? Well, we know what he did. He goes to the Nisei. The Nisei have just been fighting for 2 weeks from Roers and Bisfontaine. It's been a bloody battles. They're at R&R supposedly for 2 weeks, get new ammo, try to get some sleep. And after 36 hours of rest, they're told, you gotta go back in again. And they did. There were 56 of the 442nd were killed during that bloody week. Another 300 were wounded. And the 207 Texans were saved. And later on after the war, they made the Nisei honorary Texans. The question is that often comes up, not only then, otherwise, were the Nisei soldiers expendable, or did their valor and no retreat attitude make them the go-to unit when a military objective was critical? I'm sure some of the listeners today have definite views on that. One of my followers on Facebook was kind enough, Todd Ushijima, told me about this in conversation he had with his uncles that took part in the rescue of the Lost Battalion. He said he asked one uncle that very question, expendable. He says, I won't forget what my uncle said. They were American soldiers first, our brotherhood. And the question I ask myself, if I'm a major league manager and I'm a baseball fan, and my relief pitcher has been out there 3 days in a row, but it's the World Series. It's the 7th game, runners in first and second. I'm ahead 3-2. If the other guy gets a hit, they win the game. But if I can bring in my best relief pitcher one more time, even though his arm is tired, what do? Do you go to your second best reliever, or do you go to your best? And I think the Nisei were just tough people that you went to. You could still make the case. Maybe they went too often, but I'm not so sure. This is a picture of uh, the rescue, one of the action pictures. And I want to share with you an emotional moment, not of that day, but 76 years later. I happened to find out that David Ono of the ABC News in Los Angeles, some of you may know, always been our guardian and a promoter of the Nisei tradition. And he's with Glenn Hajiro, and his father, Barney Hajiro, got a Medal of Honor for the action. And so I'm going to go through this. And I happened to be a voyeur that day. It was early in the morning. I asked if I could come in and take a look because I'm always looking for that great scene. So again, I want you to place your mind where you are. As usual, the Germans on top of the hill. This is usually the way the fighting is. And they've got the machine guns up there. You have a unit of the 442nd on the bottom of the hill. They're going to be picked off. They either have to retreat, be picked off, or take out the machine gun nest. Hajiro looks at his buddy. There's two of them that have bar guns or machine guns. They're the only ones that has a chance to do something. They look at each other, and Hajiro says, "We got to go." They both jump up. At that second, his buddy on the right takes a bullet in the head and hits the ground. What does Hajiro do? Does he hit the ground? Does he look after his buddy? He understands his responsibility is to the men hunkering down. And he charges the damn hill and takes out both machine gun nests single-handedly while getting shot. The vagaries of war. And he got lucky. But what wasn't lucky is the courage it takes to run up a hill with machine gun firing coming at you, and one of your buddies just died. After the rescue of the 442nd, General Delquist says, "I want to have a color guard. I want the people to march. I want to show my appreciation of their courage." And the men form up. And Delquist is angry, not just a little angry, but I mean really, really angry. And he says, "I ordered everyone here. Where are they?" And Colonel Miller says, "General, this is all that's left of the 442nd. And with that, that is my prepared remarks. I think DJ will take some questions if you'd like to ask, and I'll turn it over to her now.
Mike, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. I want to acknowledge that on this Zoom webinar today, we have Floyd Nagoshi. We also have Glenn Hajiro on this call, and many of our Maui sons and daughters of the Nisei veterans, and
Wow.
also a lot of sons and daughters from Oahu as well. So I'm quite sure this talk is resonating.
I hope Glenn will say something, because I know that was a very emotional. I watched him, and to say there was tears in his eyes would be an understatement. So I hope he can give a comment or two, because it was his dad.
Yeah. As we wait for the questions to start coming in, I just also wanted to say, thank you so much for talking about that whole, where the Nisei chosen to rescue the lost battalion because they were expendable or because they were the best at what they were doing. And I really appreciate your baseball analogy. Here at the center, we get that question often. So thank you for that. We have one question here. It's, just talk about writing a historical novel. How difficult is that to do?
Well, I tell you, if I knew how difficult it was, I might have written something else. It's been a challenge, but it's been fun. I'm one of those kind of people when I do research, I look up a fact and then I start saying, wow, and I keep going on. The historical novel, accuracy becomes very important. And Google, of course, helps it out. But I have a library of over 200 books. I'm not going to change it in there. I have every place that I mention and under my books, my wife and I have actually visited. Often the visits create a scene themselves. Those of you who remember Picture Bride, I visited the temple there, and all the incidents in the temple were driven by the visit. I think you have to have a passion for history, which I always had. And also, you got to have some people who are smarter than you and are willing to read everything. So I've had a number of people read my entire book and came back with corrections, suggestions, and kept me from being somewhat humiliated by publishing the book and then find out that I made a mistake. But I think you have to be somewhat patient when you write a historical novel because of the accuracy situation.
So
That
I
answer?
see, it
Yeah.
does, it does.
Follow up. Yeah.
I see that Glenn raised his hand and he hasn't put in a question yet. Glenn, if you want to ask a question or give a statement, there's a little question and answer box at the bottom of the screen. If you can't find it, if you raise your hand again, I will actually have you join the call and you can ask your question or give your statement in person. So I hope you are hearing this. Let's see. Okay, here's a question. Oh, okay. So I'm going to find Glenn here on the participants, and I'm going to ask him to come on and ask his question. So if everyone can kind of bear with me for a moment. Mike, maybe you can talk a little bit about, someone else asked, when is your third book coming out? If you can do that while I find Glenn on this call, that'd be
Well,
great.
those people who are anxious for my next book, I hope you have patience. I'm a slow writer. I have other things I do with my life, and writing a historical novel is slow. So I'm guessing it'll be 2 years by the time I finish the book, people edit it. It could be 2.5 years. It just takes time, and I don't do it 12 hours a day. I do something every day. I have a lot of fun once I start writing the scenes. Right now, I'm writing scenes about what's going on in Japan in World War II. You know, Haro has 6 children, and the 3 of them are wearing American uniforms. One of them, the Sui Sinaga story, she's in the book as a daughter of Haro. That was manufactured. She was not manufactured. And 2 of her children are in Japan. They got stuck there. One of them's in the Imperial Forces. So I get a little bit of what's happening there and what's happening wartime. If you're an American, and she becomes one of the Tokyo Roses. There is a main Tokyo Rose, and I introduced the reader to that person out of Los Angeles. But I want to get the whole Tokyo Rose in there, in life there. So it's a bit of a challenge, but also interesting to try to tie all this together through one family, the Takayama family, and Haro, who originally, of course, came from the little island of Amakusa, and she escapes in 1905.
Well, you have a lot of fans on this call, including me. So we're looking forward to that next book. Okay, I have Glenn on the line here. Glenn, can you hear us? Let's see.
Yeah, you got to hit the sound button twice, not only here but on your computer. You got to hit the sound button.
Do you see that, Glenn?
That's always confusing. They look at the microphone, and they get that going, but they also have to have their computer on active sound.
Right. Let's see. Okay, the wonders of modern technology. Glenn, you could also email me. I know you have my email address, and we can ask your question. You can ask your question that way. If you can find your speaker button, if not, we'll keep going here. Someone else has said they love your column that you were doing in the Hawaii Herald, and they look forward to it every week. I know you were doing the Picture Bride column in Hawaii
That's
Herald.
Right.
Most of our people on this call are familiar with that. How was that? Are you going to be doing any more of that?
Oh yeah, in fact, I'd appreciate the Hawaiian Herald. They have just been so good to me. But they're carrying, a question of loyalty, and that'll run for another 2 years. And, that's a good motivation to get the next book. So, but they've been good. And I love meeting people that once in a while say, oh, you're Mike Malaghan. I feel like a rock star. And my wife is not too jealous because most of them are a little bit older than But yeah, I enjoy that. They've just been so good to me, serializing it. And I had an inspiration, Charles Dickens. His early times, he serialized his there, and I had an introduction to the Hawaiian Herald. And the Hawaiian Herald itself, you know, picture those of you who read Picture Bride, plays a role. Fred McKenna, who was the original editor and the founder of the Hawaiian Herald, was also very critical in the early days of Issei. He was an attorney without a law degree, but they didn't have any attorneys, so he ended up helping a lot of people through immigration incidences and different other legal issues of the day. And in the sugar strike, he was very important in the sugar strike, getting support for the strikers and so forth. But yeah, Hawaiian Herald has been very, very good to me.
So to that point, of people coming up and talking to you about, what your column has meant, you touched upon, you have taken on this huge responsibility of sharing this story.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that. I mean, I'm sure you have. It's very emotional. But talk to us about that responsibility and how you carry it.
Well, I do feel, it's interesting. Nobody's ever asked me that question before, but I do feel the responsibility. And there are days when I feel, oh, I don't know if I want to write this week, but I said, no, gee, I really got to finish this. I've made all these promises and the stories are so good. I'll tell you about two people I met. One of them was Katz Miho. I met her daughter at a function, his daughter at a function, and I told her I was starting to write this. Oh, you got to meet my dad, blah, 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 blah. And it was early on in the process, actually more than a decade ago. And so I met Katz Miho, and he was a spotter or forward observer for the artillery, the 522nd. And so I interviewed him, and then I interviewed him again, and pretty soon we'd had lunches together, and pretty soon we were Friday was Zippy Day, and I'd go on my bicycle, and he drove there, and we'd chat, and pretty soon he became more like a surrogate father. My own father was an alcoholic. You don't have to hear the stories, but he was almost like the dad I never had. And when my wife and I celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary, I wanted to do my vows. And he'd been a judge. So I asked him, would he be the person who would officiate over the renewal of my vows? And I was very pleased that he did that. I was a little worried because he's going to get old. His voice is weak. But I tell you, the day he did those vows, man, he was 55 years old. The voice rang out just great, and I was just inspired. And his wife picked out the costumes, an old traditional Hawaiian costume that wife and I had matching for the event. So you never know the unintended consequences of friendship that develop. And I'll mention one more, Lawson Sakai. Some of you know about him. You have to be blind and deaf not to know about him. And I've been on two trips with him, and he advocates everybody. But even last year at age 95, he was pushing me because I hadn't got the other book out quite yet, and he had an early copy of it, and he actually read it, 95 years old. But he was 95 years old, scolding me, very friendly. You got to get it published. And 95, he was still dancing, and he was the personality on the trip. The French needed a person to honor. And I'll tell you one other story, since we don't have a lot of questions. This is the first time I went over to Lawson Sakai. This is a Bastille Day story. There were 7 veterans at that time, and I had a chance to talk to them all. And they led the Bastille Day parade in Bruères. They were the leaders. The French have not forgotten, I can assure you. They realized the Nisei. So as we're approaching the town square, there's 2 elderly ladies, about the same age of these Nisei. They just march right in the middle of the road. They each select one of the Nisei and give them a hug and walk back to the curb. Not a word was spoken, but we all heard. It was an evocative moment. And what is a moment like that worth? I mean, how much would you pay to have a memory like that? Every Bastille Day, I relive that moment. And of course, when I give talks like this, I relive it. What's the value of that? Well, pretty high. So those are things that the unintended consequences of when you write, it's the relationship, magic moments. I don't have a time to go through all of them, but let me tell you, there's quite a few magic memory moments when you do this type of thing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Glenn wrote in and he said, Goro Matsumoto is on my dad's left. Only dad had the bar. Both stood up and Goro cut down. Dad started swearing and charged up the hill.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I forgot Matsumoto. I thought he was a barman too. So I'm glad he told me that because that's going to be in my book, and I don't want to have two barmen.
Right,
And a
right.
barman is a machine gun, and you need a machine gun. Yeah. And I remember Glenn talking to Ono at that time, and the two of them discussing that day. So Glenn, thank you for joining today. I feel honored that you did that, and uh, it was a great moment for you, and allowing me to, like I say, be a voyeur and listen to that was very special. And I hope I'll honor your dad's memory when I write the scene that he's going to be in.
We have some budding writers on the call. Someone wants to know how did this affect your family? You know, these are again very emotional books that you're writing.
Yeah.
As the writer, as the artist, you know, you're doing your thing. How does it affect your overall family?
Well, my wife and I had a child by the first marriage, so she's kind of, nice. But my current wife is Tomoko. She's from Tochigi, and she loves what I'm doing. I mean, if I've said I'm going to go to France to, join the 442 veterans families, if I said you stay here, believe me, that would have been the end of my marriage. So she was with me every step of the way. She's helped me market. She's had a couple parties with her Facebook followers, and I feel in some way it's geary. I think they buy the book to say they had a picture with this famous author. According to my wife, I'm famous. But no, she has been a huge of supporter and loves what I'm doing. And I retired from the corporate world 18 years ago. All Japanese women, when their husbands retire, they have this nightmare sitting home with a beer and where's my lunch? And in fact, that's a little side story. The day I retired, she says, all our marriage, I've done everything for you, prepared every meal, did all the laundry and so forth. Now you're retired. Let me show you how these dials in the wash machine work. And by the way, after dinner, you wash the dishes. And, I thought, that's fair. And so I did that, but she's been remarkably supportive. In my corporate days, she was too. So I have, in that case, the perfect wife. The other families, they're kind of outside. They live in Florida or Japan, and they're happy what I'm doing, but they don't have the same emotional attachment that Tomoko has. So I've been very blessed that she, of course, her father was in the war too, the other side. He was in Manchuria and was captured at the end of the war. It was a slave labor for 1 year, as a lot of Japanese soldiers were, and then returned to Japan in 1947 after spending his year or two of
Yeah.
labor.
Here we have another question that came in from your research. How many times was the 100th 442nd called into battle to solve problems that other units could not?
I don't really have a number. I would say that the call that they got in the 442nd was somewhat unique because of the drama and the seriousness of it. But throughout the battles, they were often put into critical situations. And the reality is, no matter where they fought, they just didn't know how to retreat very well. There are times when it's prudent to retreat. And they were not only trained soldiers, but I think there was an understanding that why white soldiers could retreat and maintain their honor, they was wondering, if we retreat, is it because we won't fight or we're not good enough or whatever? And so they made them the fiercest warriors. So as a consequence, again, go back whether expendable or not, you could almost say that their fierceness and their doggedness, I don't think it made them expendable, but boy, if you're a colonel or a general and you've got these guys there, you want to use them. And maybe they were used more often, but they were in there. So I don't have a new number for that, but they were definitely, as they climbed up the boot, they became the go-to. And the same thing in France when they were in Brueres and Vicentin and so forth.
Here's a question came in on my phone. How do you, if it were a different ethnicity that were, that had been interned,
Right.
do you think it would have had the same outcome do you think specifically that the values that the parents had, the Issei had shared with the Nisei, helped them do what they did?
Absolutely. You know, there were other ethnic groups. None of them performed at the level of the Nisei, because in America was all ethnic groups, various types, and none of them, no ethnic group was a failure. But there's no question that the same courage and bravery of the World War II, Japanese, whatever you say about World War II, the individual soldier was brave. And both the Japanese culture, the Confucian culture, the Japanese culture, honor to family, never give up. That thing of respect, of courage, it's a cultural thing. In the northern Asian communities, they all have it to some degree. The Japanese to a much larger degree. So no, what the Nisei did, I don't think in America anyway, any other subcultural group could have done what they did because of the training, the imbuement of it. The same thing that the Hollies, the white people, distrusted the Japanese. They didn't understand. The Japanese had the same respect for teachers, respect for elders, study, work hard, that the Protestant ethic did it. Only the Japanese took it to another thing. We can't let our culture down. We can't let our parents down. And they were the same Christian values. But the Hollies, all they saw was a Buddha, a heathen, an outside, strange eyes, and that type of thing. And they didn't understand that the Japanese shared the same values. They do now. We elect senators, and we don't think of it anymore, and like we did. As a consequence of the courage, no question, they jumped up on the ladder of America. Today, Japanese Americans have a higher per capita income, more people go to college, education, whatever criteria you use to do it, they live longer. So that same cultural heritage won respect of the American people. I'm not saying there aren't people at a supermarket will look at Asian eyes and say, go back where you came from, but they are minorities that other people jump on them just as fast. So they were special because of the training they had, the cultural training, and what they were learned as parents. But I can't imagine in those days some Japanese kid at school saying, the dog ate my homework.
Right. Yes. We talk about these values being Nisei values, but as you point out, they are universal values. But to your point, I think the Japanese take them to that next level. Okay, Glenn. Yeah, Glenn wrote back in. He said some veterans felt that they were indeed cannon fodder. My father said he had a job to do and an obligation to the U.S. Army. He told me, you do your duty no matter what. But even, his dad experienced prejudice after the war.
Yes, the prejudice after the war didn't end at an instant. We all know about Senator Inouye. He's one arm, he's in full uniform, he's in San Francisco, time for a haircut, and they said, we don't want Japs in here. How can they do that? But they did. Yeah, prejudice will always be with us. There's no question, there's definitely prejudice today. When my wife was shopping in Atlanta when the COVID thing came out, people looked at her. They never said anything, but she felt the stares. And anybody that follows Facebook in the West Coast, there's still incidences. But as far as the mass, I think more people respect what the Japanese did than the ones who degenerate. But and I think Glenn's father, his father was more prominent. I think more people thought that they were doing a job. A minority, a sizable minority, felt they might have been cannon fodder. And I think that debate will go on long after everybody listening to this is passed on passed
on. And for those who are watching who may have missed it or do not know, Barney Harjiro, Glenn's father, was a Medal of Honor recipient. So just for those.
He's a very interesting character, as Glenn would tell you. He got busted twice in training. He was a ferocious guy and didn't always respect everything. But boy, when it counted, he was a terror. And he lived to 95, 96 years old. The guy was a gamer.
I can't believe that we are nearing the end of our hour. I feel like we've only been on for about 15 minutes, and we must have you come back, maybe even to do something with Picture Bride. Um, I'm going to give some closing remarks, Mike, and then I'm going to pivot back to you to give some closing remarks, some whatever you want to talk about, whether it's the Nisei values and their importance today, their relevance today as much as they were back in the 1940s. But to everybody else, we thank you so much for being with us again today. I really love, as I know you do, these afternoon with the author events. All of you will be automatically signed up for our weekly Wednesday update. It's an email that comes to your inbox every Wednesday. Thank you, Mike, for reading yours and staying subscribed. It just lets you know what's happening here at the center, what's coming up, who our upcoming speakers are going to be. So we hope you stay subscribed and continue to engage with us. The rest of the activities that we have for November are really, it's our annual dinner on November 20th, Friday, November 20th. We're going to be presenting our dinner via Zoom. Alton Chung, the storyteller, is going to be our keynote speaker, and you can join for free. Or if you're interested in purchasing a dinner package, we have that as well. So check out our website or just wait for your weekly Wednesday update for all the information. And in December, we have, for our Take Leadership Series, we have Debbie Kabibi, the CEO of MEO, Maui Economic Opportunity, will be speaking to us about the nonprofit sector during COVID. On Monday, December 14th, we have the president of the hospital, Maui Health Systems, Mike Rembis, will be talking about everything that happened with the hospital and where we're going from here. And then on the 15th, we have Lee Imada, the publisher of the Maui News, and he's going to talk about all things news related, something that is going to be really, really interesting. And our next afternoon with the author is going to be Pamela Sakamoto on the 19th of December, Saturday at 1:30, and she will be discussing her book, Midnight in Broad Daylight, and that will kind of round out the year for us. So again, just check the website or wait for your weekly Wednesday update and join us for all of the events that you can. So thank you so much. Thank you, Mike Malaghan, for being with us today, taking time out of your schedule. We definitely want you to come back, but I'm going to turn it over to you now for some closing remarks.
Thank you, DJ and Floyd. By the way, that book, Midnight in Broad Daylight, is an interesting novel, so I hope a few people will read it before you bring the author on. It's worth a read, and it's not a difficult read. I'm going to give a plug for my book. If anybody's interested in a signed copy, you need to act quickly. I'm leaving for Japan Thursday. Yep, thank you very much, DJ. I have Picture Bride and Question of Loyalty. It's a flat $20. I pay for the tax, the postage, and everything, and I mail it from my home signed. You can always buy the book on Amazon or through the local distributor, Legacy. But if you want a signed copy, go ahead, and you got 3 days. Wednesday's the last day I'll be able to mail. And I guess I close with the fact that when you start writing on a project like this, I thought it was just a book. And it turned out to be more than a book. A lot of my friends and associates, people I socialize with, my email, Facebook is pretty much a 442 MIS type of a thing. So it's enriched my life. You know, you retire, you want to have a second life. Otherwise, people die early. So I have a second life, and it's given me a lot of satisfaction. It's not so much, I haven't made a lot of money on it, but I don't have to. So I'm able to enjoy the writing process without worrying if I, sell 2 more books. And so that's been very lucky. And so the relationships, Katsumiho's daughter, I very, very close, Mariko Miho. And so that's been good. So on that positive note of relationships, the joy that I've had, the trips that I anticipate when COVID is over, visiting some more places in the Far East because of the MIS, I look forward to that. And again, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your weekend. Have a wonderful rest of November. A happy Thanksgiving. And until we meet again, a hui ho, be well, stay safe. Thank you, Mike. Thanks so much. Aloha.
Aloha.